Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we've got some source material that is truly a gem. It's almost like a brilliant piece of performance art disguised as an academic lecture.
It really is.
We're doing a deep dive into the mind-brain problem, but the whole thing is done through, philosophical comedy and irony.
It's incredibly entertaining, but you really can't let the humor fool you. The original lecture, it's called The Color Blue as an Important Brain Property, is a very sophisticated intellectual exercise.
Right.
Our mission today is to unpack this apparently lighthearted exploration of consciousness, logic, and scientific reductionism, and to challenge you to question what you think you know about how we study the inner self.
And the speaker, they don't ease you into it. Not at all.
Yep.
They just jump straight into the deep end with this witty, kind of unsettling hook.
Right away. They thank the audience for being there and for remembering to bring their brains, but then immediately they plant this seed of doubt. They say something like, but it may also have been your brains themselves that wanted to be here and thought of themselves.
Okay, let's just stop there for a second. By separating the person, the you, from the agency of the brain, what is he trying to do? It's immediately destabilizing, right? It makes you wonder who's actually listening.
It's the perfect philosophical opener.
Yeah.
From the get-go, he's introducing the theme of agency, of identity. It's the core of the mind-body problem. Are we this single, unified self? Or is the brain the real agent here?
And we're just the vessel,
Yeah.
the meat suit it used to get to the lecture.
Exactly. It sets the stage for this very serious idea that consciousness might be something separate from, or at least not entirely unified with, the physical brain.
And as soon as he makes that separation, he starts treating the brain with this almost, dismissive contempt.
Yes. That's where we get into this idea of the brain is just a physical object.
He starts calling the brain the actual physical thing, such a lump of matter. I believe the original German was Materieklumpen.
That's it. And he says that without its properties, this lump of matter is not worth that much in itself.
Which forces us right into that classic philosophical battleground, the mind-brain problem. You've got the physical stuff, the matter, and then you have the intangible stuff it creates.
The mind, consciousness, thoughts, feelings, all of it. And by calling the brain just a lump of matter, he's using rhetoric to split the hard, measurable reality from the subjective internal experience. He's asking, what good is the hardware without the software?
But he's also careful not to get too bogged down in academic definitions. He sort of pokes fun at philosophers who spend all their time on these tiny distinctions.
Oh, that's one of the best lines. He just shrugs it all off,
Yeah.
saying, I have to admit I'm not very knowledgeable about these in itself, and I'm happy to leave these fine distinctions to more capable minds and consciousnesses.
I see that as a really smart move. It keeps the lecture from getting too dense. It's like he's saying, we don't need a perfect definition of Cartesian dualism to get the problem.
Exactly, but it's also a subtle jab at that academic tendency to argue about definitions instead of the real mystery. He's signaling that he wants to get straight to the core question.
Which is, if this brain, this lump of matter, is only valuable because of its properties, which single property is the most important one?
And this is where the absurdity really kicks into high gear.
Right. It's not reason, it's not memory, it's not even love. For the sake of this lecture, the most important property of the brain is the color blue.
The color blue. And you have to ask, why blue? Why not, the ability to compose a symphony or the feeling of sadness?
It seems so random.
But it's not. This is where the humor becomes a serious philosophical tool. The claim is a witty, direct reference to the problem of qualia.
Qualia, right. For anyone who needs a refresher, qualia is the individual subjective quality of an experience. It's what it feels like to see red or taste salt.
Or in this case, to see blue, the blueness of blue.
Yeah.
And blue is perfect because it's a simple, universal experience that is completely private. You can measure the wavelength of light, you can scan the brain,
Yeah.
but you can never access my feeling of it.
And the speaker points this out immediately. He says something like, and the funny thing is, you can look at my brain and not know if I actually have the color blue with me.
You have to rely entirely on my statement. That is the absolute core of the entire lecture.
It is. If I tell you I'm experiencing blue right now, you have no way to verify that. You're completely locked out of my conscious experience.
And this raises that huge problem of verification that philosophy has been wrestling with forever. How do you objectively measure a subjective state? How can you ever know if your quail of blue is the same as my quail of blue?
It's like that famous thought experiment.
What is it like to be a bat?
Exactly. The philosopher Thomas Nagel. He argued that even if you knew every single physical fact about a bat's brain and its sonar system, you still wouldn't know the subjective experience.
You wouldn't know what it feels like to be that bat. And that's precisely the point here. We can analyze every neuron firing in the lecturer's brain, but we can't access the feeling of blueness. We're stuck. We have to take his word for it.
So, this lecture is really drawing our attention to the hard limits of objective science when it comes to consciousness.
It is. The color blue, because it's so basic and yet so intensely private, is the perfect example of how some things just resist being reduced to external data.
Okay, so if the subjective experience of blue can't be objectively verified, where do we go from there? This is where he makes a wild pivot.
A huge pivot. After establishing that blue is this mysterious, unprovable property, he decides to solve its existence using the most rigid tool imaginable.
Formal logic.
Classical logic. He brings out the heavy artillery, specifically the law of the excluded middle.
He uses the Latin for it, right? Tertium non datur.
Yes, which just means a third is not given. It sounds complicated, but it's a simple, fundamental idea in Western thought.
Every statement is either true or false. Something either is or it isn't. No in between.
No middle ground, no ambiguity. And his argument is that since the brain is just a heap of matter, a physical system, well, it has to obey this strict binary law.
So matter itself works on presence or absence. A neuron is either firing or it isn't.
That's his logic. So the prerequisite is there to determine the presence of the color blue. He's forcing the subjective into a binary box. I either have the color blue with me or I don't.
And that's the parity, right? It sounds so seductively simple, but it feels like a massive philosophical overreach. He's taking a rule from math and applying it to a messy, unverified, subjective feeling.
It's the ultimate critique of reductionism. It's like trying to fit a cloud into a cardboard box. This absurd application of binary logic, affirmation and negation as the basis for everything. It's meant to mock the hubris of formal systems.
He's showing how silly it is to assume every complex human reality can be boiled down to a simple true or false.
But you can see the appeal. I mean, if everything could be reduced to a measurable binary state, then we can know everything. There are no more mysteries.
And he actually says that, doesn't he? He acknowledges how tempting that worldview is.
He does. He says, you know exactly, my dear friends, why this worldview is so seductive. There are no fundamental restrictions for this type of thinking with regard to our access to the world.
That promise of total access, total knowledge, it's incredibly tempting. If everything is just a switch that's either on or off, then we can, in theory, measure every corner of the mind.
But the whole point of using the color blue is to show that this certainty is an illusion. You can apply the logical framework, but the experience itself just slips right through the cracks.
Which brings us to the grand finale, the punchline of the whole thing. Based on this absurdly rigid faith in binary logic, what's his final prediction?
Oh, it's the perfect ending. He predicts that in the near future, it will be possible, by means of a small scan, to determine the existence of the color blue as a property of the brain, or, not to determine it.
The small scan. That is the perfect piece of philosophical comedy. It brings the whole argument full circle.
It's a clear parody of our modern faith in technology, isn't it? It gently mocks the idea that neurotech fMRI, brain scans, will eventually reduce something as complex as your private feeling of blue to a simple present or absent on machine.
It's about the hubris of thinking that the inner self is just waiting to be made completely readable by science.
Exactly. So the whole lecture is just brilliantly constructed. It starts with the brain as an object, introduces an unprovable subjective property, tries to force that property into objective logic.
And then ends with the ridiculous technological solution that comes from that flawed logic. The humor is the vehicle for a very serious philosophical critique.
Absolutely. Yeah. And by using the silly premise of the color blue, the speaker really forces you, the listener, to question your assumptions about measurement, about logic, and about scientific finality.
So this deep dive, it really shows how something playful, even absurd, can reveal the fragility of the frameworks we use to understand the world.
We rely so heavily on these strict structures, like affirmation and negation, but our internal world just doesn't fit neatly into those boxes.
And that's really the gift of the lecture. It invites us to be a little more skeptical of any model that promises too much certainty. As the source says, it invites us, with a smile, to dwell more comfortably in uncertainty.
Which leaves us with a final thought for you to take away.
If classical logic says that the basis of all thinking is just affirmation and negation, true or false, how much of our most meaningful inner life actually exists outside that binary? When you think about love, or art, or faith, Is there always a third state that strict logic just can't capture? Good night.